Good afternoon. Welcome back. We're back in session. My name is Mark Medish. I come from Washington, D.C. I'm with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which happens to be America's oldest policy think tank, founded in 1910, which is not so old by St. Gallen standards. I also happen to be your tour director for the second half of the St. Gallen cruise. And we're going to try to produce a video as good as that one in the second half. I'm always delighted and a little surprised to be invited to return to St. Gallen for 3 days in May. A few years ago, when the organizers first asked me to co-chair alongside Lord Griffiths, I thought they must have confused me with somebody else. I had certainly done nothing to deserve the high honor. I'd never gone to business school. I'm not a member of the House of Lords, at least not yet. And I've never written a prize-winning essay for the Wings of Excellence. And by the way, congratulations to this year's winners again, Shafwan, Jason, Aris. Fantastic job. Despite my suspicion of a case of mistaken identity, I showed up the first time they asked, and I've kept coming back ever since, and nobody seems to object. So, with your indulgence, I'll continue. I've concluded that the strategy actually works because Lord Griffiths does such an outstanding job with the first half of the cruise that it's already deemed a success by the time I take over. Besides, the speakers are all excellent, and we'll hear from a few more of them very, very shortly. So here we are in 2009, in the midst of the great meltdown. I think the atmosphere around us, around this gathering, is distinctly different from recent years, notwithstanding the March-April market rally in the U.S. It feels less technical, more fundamental, less about optimizing and tinkering with business models, more about regrouping and redesigning business models. Less unequivocally optimistic, more skeptical and even concerned about the path forward. There is even talk that we're witnessing the end of a whole historic era, the end of Thatcherism and Reaganism, or maybe the real end of the post-Cold War interlude, or some suggest even the end of the American era itself. And that we're witnessing the dawn of a new era, not yet fully defined or understood, but one of renewed constraints. The symposium theme, Revival of Political and Economic Boundaries, suggests both a return to some old international patterns, but also a new recognition about possible limitations of thought and action, both for policy and for the business world. Indeed, a sense of boundaries has returned in various tangible ways in the recent period, calling into question, perhaps, the viability of our globalization model, a model that many of us had come to accept as normal, rational, and inevitable. Among the patterns, we see both economic and geopolitical security variables strongly in play, much more than in recent memory. On the economic side, the rise of protectionism, the reassertion of narrower national interests in economic policy, mistrust of other people's regulatory systems, dissatisfaction with global economic governance, G20, G8, G7, G3, G2. We can't seem to find the right G. On the security side, there's a sense of new dividing lines in the world, new dividing lines in Europe, for example, people talking about spheres of influence and quasi-imperial great games, frozen conflicts turning hot and deadly, irredentism leading to local and regional instability, as we haven't seen in some time. So taken together, this has led to a new awareness, or a renewed awareness, if not sometimes panic, about boundaries and limits that we confront. Of course, some things like climate change, epidemics, and the information revolution through the internet don't seem to respect boundaries. They keep moving forward apace. In any event, I would submit to you that the sheer speed of the change of the climate of opinion is very striking. Some of the most prestigious theories and models about how the world works have collided with reality and seemingly lost out and lost credibility. The half-life of conventional wisdom has never been shorter than it is today. Just as a few examples, the flat world theory of technologically driven globalization, the valuation model for credit default swaps, the mark-to-market accounting rule, monetary policy based on inflation targeting, the US dollar as the only global reserve currency, the decoupling thesis, the BRICS thesis itself, and the list goes on and on. In this fluid and uncertain context, each country and each company, each individual, each family, frankly, must think very seriously about its own role, its own strategy to cope with the uncertainty. We heard yesterday from the Swiss foreign minister that this is exactly the thinking going on here in this country, wondering about about Switzerland's particular challenges in coping with uncertainty and redefining its role as needed. Speaking of countries, I should say a few words about my own, namely the United States. A lot of people have been saying that the American century is over and the U.S. is now just an ordinary country, especially after the Iran war, the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war. Yeah, we haven't done that one yet. That's the good news. Let's keep it that way. After the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, and the unfolding meltdown, I certainly see the risks, but I don't share the prognosis. I'm still an optimist both about the U.S. and, frankly, about world prospects. And not because of the recent stock market rally, by the way, which I'm not such a believer in. Recently, I was involved in a rather spirited debate in TheEconomist.com, which some of you might have seen, on the future of brand America, where I argued the pro side that the U.S. could indeed regain its shine. I won't tell you who won the debate, but I recommend that you take a look at TheEconomist.com if you're interested. And I argued that America could come back precisely because America's brand is change. America does not stand still, which is precisely what has confused and confounded its critics for many decades. The U.S. development model is highly resilient and adaptive because it is based on inclusionary multiculturalism, representative democracy, philosophical pragmatism, and secularism without being hostile to religions. This has provided an organic basis for growth and for renewal. I would also submit to you that many other countries in the world have adopted and adapted this model for their own, and many regions, and Europe foremost. I believe Europe has the same organic qualities as the United States, although Europe often lacks the self-confidence to pursue the opportunities to the fullest. In my view, the American idea succeeds even when the U.S. as a nation-state makes mistakes. We embrace a self-correcting model, which is very important because we make a lot of mistakes, and we make big ones when we do. As Martin Luther once said, you should sin boldly. We've certainly taken that recommendation to heart, even if we're not Lutherans. Let me conclude with a thought about the new administration, about President Obama, who happens to have been my law school classmate, which makes me feel very old. In my view, 2008 was a momentous election for the United States. And much of the world was watching precisely because it was an important election and precisely because what happens in the United States still matters disproportionately in the world. I would submit to you that the American voters faced a choice in the election between John McCain and Barack Obama, between new versions of Homeric heroes, Achilles and Odysseus, both honorable men, both men with impressive track records, but one, Achilles, standing for martial valor and hard power, and another, Odysseus, standing for the idea of a long journey homeward, to a new life. You can guess who I think was Achilles and who Odysseus. The American people overwhelmingly made the choice for our Odysseus, Barack Obama. I think, without hyping him too much, and by the way, neither Achilles nor Odysseus was a perfect hero. They both had inner struggles, as you well know. So does Barack Obama. But he embodies the best in American political culture and policy tradition. And that is a tradition of visionary pragmatism. He knows the challenge before him is a challenge of rebalancing for national and international renewal. The two most immediate issues, as we all know, are the global economic and financial crisis and the security challenge in the greater Middle East, from Palestine to Punjab. How Obama responds to these challenges will be very important for America, and I submit to you for the rest of the world. He's also added energy reform, healthcare reform, and education reform to his modest agenda. And of course, we can expect that he will be challenged by the unexpected, probably sooner rather than later. I think he's off to a promising start, but he does not have as much time as Odysseus, who wandered for 10 years before getting home. Obama has got to produce results much sooner.